Hey Symphogear fans, Zoid9000 from Genjiro's Angels here with a quick review of the 1/8 scale Tsubasa Kazanari figure from Bellfine. This is Bellfine's second release of a Symphogear figure following Chris from a few months ago. This was just released yesterday and I recorded a quick video when I opened it. It retails for about $140 depending where you shop. It's currently in stock at HobbyLink Japan and AmiAmi. The first thing you want to note when you take it out of the box is that the blades attached to her feet are actually very sharp at the ends, and very fragile when they're connected to her ankle. So the instruction booklet wants you to be very careful when you attach her to the base. The base has two plugs that plug into holes in her feet. The instructions recommend you grab her knee and push down to attach it to the base versus grabbing near the ankle because the attachment of the blades to her ankle is prone to breakage if you're not careful. After you attach her to the base, it also recommends that you keep her attached, and if you move her, pick up the base versus picking up the figure itself. Next up, we have the blade. The blade is perhaps my favorite part of the figure because it's well detailed and looks very sleek. The pointed edge of the blade is very sharp, and in order to put it in your hands, you have to remove the end piece of the blade just by pulling straight out. However, it can be kind of difficult, and the blade is thin, so it might be prone to breakage if you're not careful. Basically, make sure you have a good grip and pull pretty tight. Eventually it'll come off. Next thing you want to do is slide the blade into her hands one by one. This can be a little difficult because the blade actually has some indents on the hilt, so it doesn't push through very easily. And you have to be very careful not to break either the blade or her hands by applying too much pressure. What I did is I kind of wobbled it back and forth until I could get it through. After you get it initially through, it's pretty easy, but you might have to apply a bit more force than you might think. After you get it through to the end, the next step is to put the end cap back on. What's important to note here is that the end cap actually has an indent that goes a certain way, so you're going to want to check to make sure that that matches up with the blade. The side on the right actually has a slightly higher indent. As I unboxed the figure, I took a really close look at all the details and paint applications. I was pretty impressed with it versus Chris, who felt kind of flat in that department. Tsubasa's paint apps are very shiny and clear. However, there are a few blemishes, as I noticed an excess plastic piece on the back of her armor here. Overall, I really like the sleekness and bright color of it. I did notice one other paint application miss on her headphones, where there's a black dot clearly visible. It's a little unfortunate, but I feel like this is kind of unavoidable. The biggest complaint I have about this figure is the stands. Or more accurately, maybe the poses. The poses require that their legs be so far apart that the stands have to be equally as wide, which makes it difficult to pose the figures together. On the website, Bellfine included an image of Tsubasa and Chris pretty much right next to each other. However, duplicating that in real life is pretty much impossible. The stands require so much space that it's pretty much impossible to get them next to each other. I tried various things like putting the stands over one another, but even that makes it awkward because there are so many parts sticking out that it can end up hitting the other figure. Not to mention the fact that even if you successfully get the stand on top of the other, it doesn't balance perfectly, so one character is lopsided. Here's a quick comparison with the Tsubasa Figma. I think the one striking thing about these two figures is of course in the design of the gears. The Figma was from Season 1, and the Bellfine figure is based on her Season 3 design. Putting them together like this really makes you notice how much skin is showing in the current Tsubasa's design versus the old Tsubasa's design. Next up, here's a comparison with the CD case from GX, which is what the design was based off of. I actually find it to be a very striking resemblance. The pose is exactly the same, and the facial features match really well. I think for figures, the most difficult aspect is the face. It's so easy to screw up the subtle details, such as the eyes and the mouth. In fact, this is my big problem with Bellfine's previous release, Chris. If you look at the CD cases, in Chris's case, you'll notice that she has a toothy smirk. However, when you actually look at the face on the figure, her mouth isn't open, and it's a simple smile. Which is kind of disappointing, because I don't feel that really matches Chris's smug personality. However, this can be difficult to tell from far away, so I think the appeal of the figure itself is just the overall impact of seeing her posed in her gear form, not to mention the weapons that they're holding. Lastly, here's a lineup of all the figures that have been released so far, sans the Chris Bunny version, which I have but forgot to take out when I was recording to this. At the current moment, this includes Bellfine's Tsubasa and Chris, the Nendroid Tsubasa Hibiki Chris, the Figma Tsubasa, the Figma Hibiki, and that's where I'd put Figma Chris, if there was one!